some point sooner or later, almost everything has an entry in its respected genre that tackles environmental issues, be it a kid's cartoon or just superheroes in general, where some super greasy villain is polluting everything, so the squeaky clean, morally sound babyface hero has to stop the dirty bastard and then teach us all a lesson about not letting sea life get stuck in six-pack cases or some shit. It may sound like I'm undermining that stuff, but I'm on a level with y'all. Straight up. I watched Captain Planet when I was younger. I watched the shit out of it. I thought the green mullet was cool, and the theme song was catchy as fuck. Even had an action figure of him. Yep. And if I still had it, I'd be putting it up to the camera right now to show you just how sad and lonely I truly am.
Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero.
Sometimes I think I share too much of myself in this show. I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane? Alright, so now that every last cool point that I've ever amassed over the years has been revoked, the subject at hand here is what happens when the horror genre gives its own personal try at the whole environmental message thing. In all honesty, I think it's the best place for it. There's an assload of potential here. The whole man turned into a superhuman monster by toxic waste angle is timeless. One of the best examples, of course, is Troma's Toxic Avenger. Though I think the perfect example of using pollution as a tale of terror is the lesser-known 1979 film about a paper mill built on native land that poisons and mutates the inhabitants and wildlife in the surrounding area because mercury gets into everything, resulting in a horrifying bastard child of nature and mutagenic chemicals. This is Prophecy, the monster movie. Well, no shit. I mean, is that subtitle really necessary? As opposed to what? Prophecy the Leprechaun? I mean, okay, there's a movie from '95 called The Prophecy, starring Christopher Walken as Archangel Gabriel, and maybe that's why the distinct tagline was added. Fuck that, though. If anything, that one should have some stupid subtitle for coming out 16 years later. Prophecy. Good guy Lucifer. Prophecy not only covers environmental issues, but also racism and unplanned pregnancy. This is a movie that I can safely assume was meant to touch base with liberal audiences, and that's certainly not a bad thing. A paper mill being built on an Indian reserve causes the natives to protest in the street and set up roadblocks for the logging companies, who in turn are setting up restraining orders against the Indians that occupy the land. Dr. Vern, who normally works for public health, treating things like babies being bit by rats in the projects, is enlisted to be a safety inspector for the logging company and the general area surrounding it. Whether the results are positive or negative, one side will be forced to quit their bickering.
I'm in public health. I'm a doctor. And you know how to deal with human beings.
A scene like this would most likely be super preachy in a ton of other films. But I actually think this is handled really well here. For one, it helps that they're filming in what appears to be a genuine slum. I mean, if it isn't one, they did one hell of a job dressing the location. You get a real dirty and grimy vibe in the apartment and believe that a place like this would definitely be infested with rats. While Vern spends his time in the ghetto, his wife Maggie is a concert cello player performing for high society. Though they may live two ridiculously separate professional lives, they share many of the same ideologies, like not bringing a child into what they consider to be such a corrupted world. Problem is, she's pregnant with his child, and the situation has her completely conflicted. She doesn't know whether to keep or abort it, and she can't find the nerve to tell Vern about it. Bitch, make up your mind. Pro-choice or pro-life. You can't just sit on your ass and expect the problem to fix itself. Either karate do or karate don't. Karate maybe, you stand in middle of road and get hit by car. Really though, what this is a very basic horror plot device. It's to set up the fear of, oh my god, what the fuck is inside my body? Later on in the film, when Vern finds out that the paper mill has been poisoning the land with mercury, it dawns on Maggie that her unborn child may be affected just like the wildlife, since earlier in the film, she's bit by this spastic-ass raccoon that shows up at their cabin going completely apeshit. Maggie now has even more fear of both being pregnant and telling Vern about it, especially after he explains that mercury has mutagenic qualities and is most definitely what has not only been making the wildlife sick, but infecting the inhabitants. For example, the natives were eating the contaminated fish and giving birth to deformed and stillborn children. It's some pretty heavy shit, if I do say so myself. Also, motherly figures have it really bad in films like this, don't they? Cronenberg's Fly. Gina Davis has sex with an unknowingly gene-spliced Jeff Goldblum and is pregnant with his fly fetus. The Omen. A woman gives birth to the fucking Antichrist. The Alien films are the only ones I can think of where men are presented with that horrific fate, too. Equality in being pregnant with horrible monsters. Yay? And speaking of horrible monsters, when Maggie and Vern arrive to the settlement, nobody bothered to notify them beforehand that people have been going missing in the woods, the latest being an entire search team, save for one dog that managed to get away. Mr. Isley, the owner of the paper mill, tells Vern about a local legend that he claims the Indians are using to scare his employees.
People start disappearing, and the Indians spread the word that they were taken by Katahdin. That's one of their legends. They call it Katahdin. Yeah, it's sort of a Bigfoot, I guess, only it's uglier. Yeah, it's larger than a dragon and got the eyes of a cat.
Alright, if this movie is honest in any way, shape, or form, our monster is going to look a little something like this. Vern believes that this mythical beast could very well be more fact than fiction. He sees enough proof in what the mutagen has been doing to the wildlife, creating massive loon-eating salmon and oversized tadpoles. So there's no reason why there couldn't be something bigger in the same vein of Bebop and Rocksteady or the fucking Man-Bear Pig or something. He teams up with Mr. and Mrs. Hawks, passionate and seemingly insane activists. At least Mr. Hawks might be on the loony side. We're introduced to Hawks at a roadblock. He refuses to let anybody from the logging company or paper mill through.
I'm gonna tell you right now! You cut my head off before you cut these trees!
Oh, come on!
We don't see the monster yet at this point in the film, but we are treated to a battle between a proud Indian with an axe and a jerk lumberjack with a chainsaw. Unfortunately, Hawks loses the fight, and nearly does end up losing his head. This is enough to pique Vern's interest. Naturally, he does think Hawks is pretty fucking crazy, but to hate the paper mill this much, there has to be something backing that hate. It isn't even just that mutagen is poisoning everything and everyone, but the natives are now being blamed for it. Isley, that racist pile of shit, believes that the missing people are to do with the Indians, and that they're not getting sick, they're just drunk and stupid. When the remains of a family camping out in the woods are found, Isley automatically forms a lynch mob to go and arrest Hawks, and others he feel may be involved for reasons of prejudice. What follows is one of, if not the most daring escape I've ever seen on film. Holy shit, did I really just see that? When Hawks is accused of murder, he starts out by punching Whitey in the face and then takes off through a cabin, crashing through the window on the other side, all in one shot. Hawks is a fucking superhero. It's a shame that Hawks isn't actually played by a genuine native Indian, though. I wasn't going to make a big deal out of this, but he's played by the very Italian Armando Assante. This actually seems to be a reoccurring thing in movies. Assante as Hawks, Franco Nero as Kioma, Sylvester Stallone as Rambo, that retarded Indian from Shriek of the Mutilated played by that buff, totally Italian guy. Granted, Nero and Sly played half Indians, but still. It just seems like such an odd, ironic choice to cast Europeans as native Indians. I mean, they're being played by the same people that in real life are of the same variety that came and sort of took this continent away from them.
To je dovoljno. Biti italijanski indijanac je ponosna nazlada. Naša odnosa u indijskom kulturu odlazi nazvad izvan pisanja istorije. Ne znaš o čemu pričaš.
Okay. A, pretty sure that's Serbian. And B, you're not wearing any pants, are you? Holy shit. Should I call you Chief Diggler? Hey, remember when I mentioned stuff about a mutagenic monster? I should probably talk about that. The third act of the film is awesome, and it's awesome because the rest of the film is paced incredibly well. We don't see much of the monster at first, but it's a looming presence throughout the movie, and we do get to see what it can do through its slaughter of the camping family, even though it is kind of unintentionally hilarious. Maybe it's cruel, but I think it looks totally funny when this kid is killed. His sleeping bag makes him look like a banana trying to hop away. I do give credit to the film for pulling no punches, though. Yeah, it's completely obvious that the whole family was gonna die, but it is always rather unnerving when a child dies on screen. The movie does a great job of keeping suspense, and nothing ever feels like filler. I like the characters, and the environmental subplot works for what it is. With all of that combined, when the monster is finally fully revealed, it's very effective. The first time I saw the movie, it scared the fuck out of me. One scene especially when they're driving in the black of night trying to get back to civilization, and the monster just roars out from the tree line, lit up only by the truck lights. The monster in the film is a mutagenically deformed bear with enhanced size and strength. It's supposed to be at least 12 feet tall, and it's pretty gruesome looking. A fine job is done in presenting it as a very real, very deadly threat. With single swipes of its massive bear claws, it can destroy large vehicles and smash through cabin walls. Not to mention, when this thing hits you, you're done. Unless you're Mr. Hawks. Surely he's gonna be the one to take this ugly motherfucker down. Didn't see that one coming at all. Mrs. Hawk's father believes strongly in the story of Katahdin and is under the impression that the bear is actually the mythical creature and believes that he can communicate with it. This gets him killed in a comically anticlimactic fashion. I mean, it's a well-staged shot, all foggy with the bear killing him in the distance, but seeing his old ass get flung back and forth like a ragdoll for a split second just looks so funny, because 1 minute he's standing before the beast, and the next minute, that. You know, now that I think about it, this movie has some wonderfully spastic moments in it. Spazzy raccoon, hopping banana kid, ragdoll grandpa, Hawks running through a fucking window. I think you know what's coming. Mutagen dance party. The climax of the film pits Vern in a one-on-one bout against the monster that doesn't exactly end in a realistic way. Yeah, it's a cheesy monster movie. Doesn't mean I buy it. After seeing the thing get shot with bullets and arrows alike, destroy trucks, houses, and people, it somehow doesn't crush Vern's bones into a fine paste, and it just sort of lets him stab it. This thing should have been blown up or something. I mean, the film Grizzly found a way. They shot the fucking thing with a bazooka, and that was just a regular grizzly. This was Katahdin, the mighty ugly bear of doom. Smash cut to a plane. Vern and Maggie are being flown back home. Will Maggie give birth to a hideously deformed monster of superhuman size and strength? Did they get the paper mill shut down? Did all those people die in vain? Well, I think that answers my question. Prophecy was written by David Seltzer, who 3 years prior to this film wrote the all-time horror classic, The Omen. Prophecy even has some similarity to The Omen in that Maggie is worried about giving birth to some evil monster. John Frankenheimer directed it, and like Seltzer, has some very notable films under his belt as well, like Manchurian Candidate. TV veteran actor Robert Foxworth played Dr. Verne. A year before Prophecy, he was in Omen 2. Okay, I realize that isn't terribly interesting, but I wanted to give the guy some credit. He does do a great job as Dr. Verne, though the supporting cast is far more interesting, simply because of the connections. Maggie and Hawks both have fairly large ties to Sylvester Stallone. Hawks, played by Armando Sante, who has twice played Stallone's on-screen brother, once in the 1978 film Paradise Alley, and the other time in 1995 as Judge Rico, Judge Dredd's brother. And Maggie is played by Talia Shire, who played Stallone's wife Adrian in the iconic Rocky films. Katahdin the ugly-ass mutant bear was played by the late great Kevin Peter Hall, an incredibly charming and light-hearted man who stood over 7 feet tall and had an amazing career before passing away in 1991. He's played other makeup-heavy monsters like Harry from Harry and the Hendersons, but to many people, his most notable role is the brutal intergalactic big-game hunter, Predator. He was more than just a guy in a suit. He brought an incredible level of emotion to the characters he played and really brought them to life. Katahdin is no exception. This was Peter Hall's first role, and he was fantastic as the mutated killer bear. He knew how to portray the power that was needed, and with his skills and body language, made an already frightening monster all the more terrifying. And whether people recognize it as a reference or not, Prophecy is part of pop culture. I mentioned the man-bear-pig from South Park earlier, which is actually inspired by Katahdin. Trey Parker and Matt Stone are good friends with Troma frontman Lloyd Kaufman, who distributed their first feature film, Cannibal the Musical. So it's no surprise that they'd reference something like Prophecy, as they're obviously fans of films like this. Prophecy was filmed all over Vancouver, British Columbia. It's widely known by now that many films and TV shows are filmed in my home province, but this movie marked the beginning of Hollywood North, the major start to the development of a massive film production business in Vancouver. And according to IMDb, acclaimed horror author Stephen King is said to be quite fond of the film. Now, I'm no Stephen King and never will be, but I'm quite fond of it too, and I recommend the hell out of it. But don't take my word for it. Hey, naked Serbian Indian, what'd you think of it?
Odlično.